What's up, everybody? Brett here, back today playing some more Total War Warhammer 2. It's going to be another community cast for it. It's going to be me versus Salty Bacon. I love this game. This game was super fun. It was fun because my opponent's build was a little out of the ordinary, and so was mine, obviously. It's the way I love to play. And we're going to go ahead and slow-mo it. That way we can go over the armies, because I was really caught off guard here. I was expecting something completely different from the Skaven player. As soon as I locked in my greenskins, I saw him switch to Skaven, and I was like, "Oh Lord, here we go! Artillery, avalanche mortars. It's gonna get pretty saucy, and we're gonna have to advance." But my build is strange as well, and I don't think my opponent was ready for it. So frontline, all goblins. I've got, I think, five low tier unchevron goblins in the front line. I've got them backed up, and you can see here the big one is already launching pieces of his own body to try and crush these plague monks. That's all you're missing, guys. Don't worry about it. Snotling pump wagons. I've got 3 of these guys. Excellent, cheap, not cavalry. No horses here. They're excellent, cheap chariot units that absolutely destroy low-tier Skaven units, and I love them for that. They're super cheap, and they're excellent as like a 1-2 punch with goblins. Let the goblins run in. Let them tie up the infantry, whatever quality they are, and then you follow up with a charge through your own ranks safely with the Snotling pump wagons. And it's just kind of a nice 1-2 punch that I find to be pretty good. In addition to the big one throwing pieces of his own body and doing that damage from range, I also brought 1 Goblin Rock Lobber. It's 600 gold. It's a pretty cheap investment that can give you the range advantage in some matchups. But also, you know, if it gets a couple kills and gets destroyed, it's no big deal if the enemy focuses it. Let's say he had some Warp Lightning cannons that were doing work. They might decide to shoot this instead of shooting something like the Ragnarok Queen, which is something that I've invested quite a bit in here. After playing that game the other day with the opponent that brought it, I really wanted to play around with the Ragnarok Queen. It's been a while since I've seen her and got a chance to use her myself. And then Grimgor Ironhide, hiding behind her fat butt. He has all of his abilities, which I'm going to make good use of this game, and I'm excited to show you guys that. Just some skirmishers, Forest Goblin Spider Riders. I like them for their ranged poison. And then Goblin Wolf Riders here to protect my rear, but also excellent in the matchup versus Skaven, Beastmen, anything with low leadership, because what you use them for in actuality is just to chase things off the battlefield, and to clean up routing units, or just to tie things down so that your superior units can do work. So now I was expecting a big centralized army, and what I got instead was this kind of flank overload, this sneaky flank that my opponent was attempting to use, perhaps trying to draw me into a bit of an engagement, an unwinnable engagement. With the wolf rats with poison, anything that engages them is going to get tied down, and at the moment that I engaged them, I didn't realize these were the poison variants. I just thought these were the standard armor piercing ones, and I get caught just a little bit here trying to escape. And then the Death Runners with concealment bombs, and then Deathmaster Snikch himself. I didn't see him for the longest time thanks to his concealment bombs, and I ended up having to play around him. Now he has, we should actually pause this because there's going to be some action going on behind us, and man, I love his model. He's got the big dagger in his tail. So Death Runners plus Deathmaster can pretty much kill just about anything. They're an incredibly powerful 1-2 punch. They have the Weeping Blades, which takes armor down by 50%, big weapon strength, and also all of these different abilities and buffs. Anything around him loses melee defense and leadership. He has Slippery, which can give him more melee defense. Concealment bombs, we've already seen. Deathmaster Sigil kind of wrecked me. It made it so that I couldn't move, and at the time I was playing this game, I totally forgot he had this ability, and he used it several times on Grimgor, which we'll see in a bit here. And I kept not that I was losing movement orders, which sometimes happens in this game. It was a bug for quite some time. Not a bug, a feature. But Deathmaster Sigil, I totally forgot this was an ability, and every time I looked, Grimgor wasn't on target, and it totally messed me up. And then Whirl of Weeping Blades, which is a really cool move I hope we get to see. It's a vortex ability that I think we should get to see. My opponent did something very similar to me. He went super cheap on his front line, just the Skaven slaves, with some Plague Monks being the real hard hitters here. Once again, great versus goblins and low tier orcs. Really good weapon strength, melee attack, melee defense. They're just unarmored, but to kind of back them up with that, they do have some physical resistance, and they do also have Frenzy. If we can hover over that for a second, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, gives them some bonuses in melee. He's also got some Rat Ogres, 2 groups here, and a Packmaster on one of the newer units from the last DLC, and this thing has regen, so that's going to make it pretty scary for us. Running with the pack, giving it even more regen. So he's got regen on top of regen. I totally forgot about that. Scrying Stone. Lots of abilities. I haven't messed with these guys too much in the multiplayer scene, so I'm not sure what abilities they gave them, but it looks like they gave them some pretty good ones. Shock Collar, we know from our campaign. But by far and away, kind of the scariest units for me. Also, guys, I didn't see these Warp Grinders, these other Wolf Rats here. There was so much on the field that I had to be aware of. I was almost instantly aware of the Warp Fire Throwers. And I was like, oh god, I don't want to get hit by those guys with my goblins. And then I was like, oh god, I really don't want to get hit by the avalanche mortars. And then eventually I did see the warp grinders. And I was like, oh god, I don't want to get hit with those. So a lot of diversified threats here that I had to deal with. And the first being this flank that was being overloaded. And you'll see a big hit coming in from the Rogue Idol. I decided the most expensive things that I could see and reach were the Plague Monks. So that's what I'm going to be using my artillery to hit. I think I kind of swing and a miss for a hot second over here. Yeah, I don't know if any of my my artillery shots end up landing. But my opponent has a big army that's going to be very tough for him to micro. And I'm instantly seeing the situation over here is pretty dire. So I'm going to use my Goblin Wolf Riders to screen out these Wolf Rats so that I can save my Forest Goblin Spider Riders for future engagements. And then that was the time when I saw Deathmaster Snikch and I was like, oh lord, what the heck's going on here? I think in any minute now I'm going to move Grimgore. I'm going to start allocating different forces to try and slow down whatever the heck is going on here. Because at this point, I'm thinking if I missed that, what else did I miss? And maybe there's some other things that I need to deploy here. You'll see I'm sending in one of my goblins. And 300 gold to tie down all of this is super worth it to me. We're breaking off those wolf rats. That's nice. And I get suspicious that there might be more stuff over here. There isn't. But to be safe, I put the goblin wolf riders there to kind of protect my flanks. To keep maybe anything from getting into my rock lobber. So my opponent's going to be starting to move some of his stuff forward. The Skaven slaves have advanced. I hit them with the goblins and then charge them with the Snotling pump wagons. And that's going to cause like an instant break. Of course, the Ragnarok Queen getting in there is going to be great as well. And the big one here, still throwing chunks. He's decimated the Plague Monks all by himself. And I feel safe enough at this point to kind of go out on my own. Grimgore here, popping the Wah, giving everyone this massive buff. He does have his own unique Wah. Base weapon damage, melee attack. And that's going to allow me to win a lot of engagements that I might even should be losing here. These Death Runners are going to run through my goblins who are not going to hold for very long. But we're shooting at them. They have no real resistance to missile attacks as weak as these are. You see that like 1 or 2 volleys from the avalanche mortars is going to take my goblin rock lobbers offline. And I was curious at the time. I missed this in the battle. I was like, what the heck is dumpstering my my rock lobbers? But I see that now. I was focused on shutting them down. I summoned some spider hatchlings. I'm crushing the Ragnarok, well, with the Ragnarok Queen, I'm crushing these rat ogres. And I've got the Rogue Idol targeting them just in the hopes that it'll do some work. Snotling pump wagons here temporarily caught off guard. Let's go ahead and slow-mo because there's so much I was trying to micro all over the battlefield. My opponent's play here really caught me off guard. And you'll see I started to get onto Deathmaster Snikch. I got your next popped. One of Grimgore's many buffs. I had all of his buffs popped here for a second. Gitsnik'd. I was just planning on putting Deathmaster Snikch in a trash can, flipping him upside down and slamming him inside of it. But even with his speed lowered, I still couldn't quite catch up to him. 38, 29, and then in come the Warp Grinders, which I've got some Snotling Pump Wagons on. My goblins here are getting caught up a little bit on the Death Runners, but this is a great trade for me. I'll trade that all day long, while the Forest Goblin Spider Riders are shooting at whatever they can, because I just want to apply poison to everything in their radius, if possible. And the concealment bomb's going off. He's trying to get away from me, and I'm going to see if I can't pin him down. A Ragnarok Queen, still doing work. Hasn't been touched nearly. Still 7k HP, and just a little bit of help. Oh, actually, her help has been pushed off. These goblins, my center here has actually collapsed. The pump wagons are running. The goblins are running. My rock lobbers are running. And that's going to leave the Rogue Idol here with no... I think he just probably threw his last chunk. And he has an ability that if he uses it, rock bottom, he can do some damage to himself in order to replenish. But I realize at this point that his ammo is not the useful part of him. He's got 12k HP, 150 armor. I just need to fight in melee with him. There's no centralized blobs of infantry that I can get some sort of advantage out of. My Goblin Wolf Riders ended up, I moved them up and around and hit these Skaven slaves in the back, so we've completely cleared up this entire flank here. My spider hatchlings are on top of the Packmaster. Let's go ahead and put it back in normal speed. And the Snotling pump wagons are going to do a great job of just disrupting these very expensive avalanche mortars, who are one of the most fearsome units on the battlefield. But if they can't shoot a target, if they don't have any expensive infantry, let's say, to shoot at, they become almost worthless. And in melee, the armor-piercing anti-infantry of even a cheap chariot unit like the pump wagons is going to be enough to kind of send them packing. And these decimated groups of plague monks are not going to be enough to kind of stop that. And the rogue idol is going to be getting in with these rat ogres. I have absolute confidence he'll be able to stomp them out. And then I managed to get on Deathmaster for just a second, and Grimgor did what you would expect him to do. He crushed him. But here we go. Deathmaster Sigil is going to be forcing me to kind of like sit here and wait. I just got to, there's nothing I can do about it. Thankfully, I'm not under any type of focus fire. But we're routing things off the battlefield. I'm going to be, you know, choosing targets here any second now. Just kind of delegating which units will chase and which units will try to stay in the fight. The front line looks like it's going to me. Snikch is able to come in here and try to support his Packmaster. But this is not a fight that the Packmaster wants. The Packmaster is an armor-piercing unit. I guess it does have anti-large. I didn't think it did, but now that I see that it does. I thought it was more of a anti-infantry monster, but I guess not. But even still, man, it's the Ragnarok Spider. It's got 120 armor, fluctuating between that and 60, thanks to the Weeping Blades on the Deathmaster. And these are back online. The Warfire Throwers, they do apply an on-hit effect that is, you know, pretty bad, but it was also hitting the Packmaster, which was taking away its regeneration. But it's at this point that Grimgor showed up to the fight again, just constantly hunting the Deathmaster. And, yeah, with no leadership, even the remaining forces, which were still, you know, doing some work, were not able to sustain, and I was able to push them off the battlefield. And this is what I was the most sad about. Right as the game ended, I was like, no, I was going to get a good belly flop, and I was going to try and get you guys a nice cinematic of that. But I just had so much beef in this army that I think it was pretty difficult for my opponent to deal with. Maybe perhaps not expecting this. I had too many, you usually call them like fulcrums, too many points of, like, you got to deal with this, right? The big one is one of those things, you got to deal with it, or else it takes over the game. You got to deal with the Ragnarok Queen. She takes over the game. You got to deal with Grimgor. He takes over the game. Everything else is pretty much garbage that I had on the battlefield. And it was all just meant to buy time so that either Grimgor could hunt a Lord, so that, you know, I could sit back as long as I wanted to with the big one, or so that I could just run over the middle of the center of the field. You know, it just depends on how I chose to play this, how my opponent chose to draft his army. So his army had some ranged elements, but maybe perhaps wasn't expecting me as the greenskins, normally kind of a rush faction or a kite faction is what I see a lot. Not expecting me to have such a range advantage, not expecting me to have the tools to deal with his flank perhaps. I was on him right away. If I had deployed, let's say, my Spider Riders to the other side of the battlefield, and that flank had been exposed, Deathmaster might have just been able to get in, sneak around, shut down my artillery. Perhaps it could have been a different game. But thank you to Salty Bacon for a good game, for good sportsmanship. I don't hate your army, it's just the tools that you brought were just ill-equipped to deal with the tools that I brought. Even had they gotten maximum value, I mean, you're killing goblins at the end of the day. Not a ton here to deal with the big threats that I brought. And if we just want to look at damage value, damage dealt, I would expect, I don't know if the Ragnarok Queen also counts the damage dealt by the Spiderlings. If so, it kind of looks right. But if it definitely doesn't count the kills. It probably doesn't count the summons. And Grimgor was basically just hacking at Snikch the whole game. So thank you guys so much for watching. For once, goblins actually looked... They actually looked OP when they were fighting Skaven slaves, which got like 0 kills. My goblins just matched up so beautifully versus my opponent's front line. I basically didn't have to invest in a front line at all, and I won the front line fight, which is so rare. Really only against the Skaven can that happen, but it worked. And that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this replay. It was a fun one to play. I love it when both players take something that's a little bit off meta, and you can just kind of, like, chaos ensues, and you can just kind of see how, you know, more unique units like Warp Fire Throwers, they could have been good here. Unfortunately, they just kind of weren't, right? My Styling Pump Wagons, in a lot of matchups, not good, but here, quite good. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. My name is Brett. Channel's Goodtalk Gaming, and as always, y'all, talk to you later. See you later. I don't know. When I ramble too long at the end of videos, I end up saying my outro like 3 different ways. And then if I go to do a serious outro, I end up just messing it up. So, YouTube 101, don't mess up your outro. Later, guys.